Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Festival of Literature. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome my honored guests, Arpita Das and Kira Jean. Welcome, Kira and Arpita.
Hi, lovely to be here, Sabin.
Um, so, a little bit about the topic first, um, and I'm just going to read out what I had envisioned. So, while the publishing and media industry seemed to be thriving due to the digital revolution as a result of cost effectiveness and new revenue streams, book publishing and journalism have had to rethink their businesses distribution, and delivery strategies amid increasing consumer preference. In addition to this, social media had initially played a critical role as far as driving traffic and onboarding consumers were concerned. Now, social media referrals seem to be declining. And this session will also explore the fight over control as far as new advertising on social media is concerned. So, a little bit about our honored guest. Arpita Das is an alumna of St. Stephen's College, Delhi University, and the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, for which she received the Felix Scholarship. She is the founder publisher of the award winning independent publishing house based in New Delhi, Yoda Press. As associate professor, practice writing. She teaches the publishing seminar to senior students of creative writing at Ashoka University and a foundation course called Introduction to Critical Thinking to first year students. In the past, she helped set up the Word Lab at the Indian Institute of Human Settlements in Bangalore and led to the SAGE School of Publishing courses at various universities and institutions across India. Arpita writes often on book culture, publishing, popular culture, gender, and bibliotherapy for various periodicals and platforms. She is also the editor of South Asia series at Melbourne University Publishing. Welcome, Arpita. Kira Jean is a highly sought after success coach and entrepreneur with over 15 years of experience in the personal development industry. Her private clients are some of the world's top creatives, entrepreneurs, and visionaries. Kira is driven by her mission to shape the world by helping to shape powerful, empathetic, and resilient leaders. Passionate about igniting creativity and expanding consciousness, she fuses her experience in a range of fields to bring life altering knowledge to people around the world. Alongside her coaching practice, she is the founder of the Dreamwork Collective, a tiny but mighty publishing house sharing diverse voices and powerful stories with the world. An emerging lifestyle brand, rewilding.co, which houses a curated collection of nature's best hacks for the independent mind and free in spirit. So, welcome, Kira.
Thank you so much.
So I'll begin with my first question to both of you. Uh, what was your reaction as a publisher when platforms like Facebook and Twitter came alive? Who'd like to go first? So we'll do it alphabetically. Arpita?
Yeah, that I tell you, I've suffered that all my life. But I also just want to say I love that description, tiny but mighty. Kira,
yeah,
I might just
I
steal
paused as
that
well.
as with attribution to you. Of course, I'd love to steal that.
Go
But
ahead. Please.
uh, thank you. It's the tiny but mighty bit is what makes me sort of think of why it was such an important time for us. I think the way I remember it, um, in Instagram, of course, came later, but 2008, 9. And I I remember it was like a whole new world sort of opening up to me and to us at Yoda Press. Um, and the most important part of the whole story was that we, we had never had, being a small independent press, we had never had access to paid advertising. And we'd always wondered, how does one sort of fill that gap so that we can reach out to our audiences? And I think the one or two things that we could afford to do, an ad in a reviews magazine. I remember we used to put out an ad for our new books and Biblio and things like that. I mean, one used to just do that persistently, just hoping against hell that, news of our new books would get out there. But in vain is what I can say. And then in came Facebook and Twitter. And with Facebook first and then on Twitter, I felt that I was immediately, connected to not just my audience and a growing audience, because as it happened with our kind of publishing at Yoda Press, um, as the millennials became our readers, and then now Gen Z became our readers, we are actually now coming into our own, and we are finding our natural born readers, as it were. So it meant the world. And but it wasn't just the audience. What it also did was it kind of connected us to a larger community of independent knowledge producers like ourselves, independent booksellers, um, across the world. And that also meant the world in a space which can sometimes feel very, very isolated. So that's how it was for me. Yeah.
Kira?
Well, we began the Dreamwork Collective in 2017, so it was right in the middle of when Instagram was kind of the big platform, and I think that influenced also the way in which we set up the publishing house. And it really began, I was running workshops helping people to use words and storytelling and writing as a way to create healing. And from my background as a coach and therapist, I was kind of working in that modality. And at the time, around 2017, blogs were really big. Instagram was becoming really big. Facebook had already kind of birthed a lot of personal brands through that. So it felt like quite a natural extension from that world to then start looking at, well, how do we take that more independent content and transform that into a book and something that can be published and put out into the world in a different medium. So that's kind of how our business started. It was off the back of that kind of blogging, Facebook, Instagram revolution that saw a lot of independent content creators coming out with wisdom or stories to share. And we looked at ways in which we could capture that, but then also nurture that. So we built kind of an ecosystem around it where we did writing workshops and training and things like that to try and also bridge the gap between content creation and then what it actually takes to write something that can become a publishable book. So I think for us, it was an incredible opportunity. It's kind of the right moment to be able to step in and leverage what social media was already creating and then find ways to kind of funnel that into being able to put books out into the world and share stories that perhaps wouldn't have otherwise had a platform had it not been for social media at the time.
Arpita, would you like to add something before I?
Yeah, I mean, just that, that makes, that I'm nodding because I completely resonate, because I feel like when Instagram came into the story, which was around the same time for us, 2016, 17, there was an added kind of kind of boost to where we felt we could reach, who all we felt we could reach. And as I said, natural born readers sort of growing with every passing generation for our kind of publishing, which is very progressive publishing. And we just felt that, we were finally speaking to the people that we should have been speaking to since the beginning of Yoda Press, which is back in 2004. So between 2004 and 2009, now when I look back at it, it feels like a complete wasteland in terms of trying to reach um, our audience, and also in terms of trying to build a community, or be part of a community. Because I'm just, as Kira was speaking, I was trying to remember what on earth did we even do. I remember we used to do a lot of mailers. Because of course, we used to send out 100 emails. We had a massive mailing list. At that time, the big thing was massive mailing list, which we mailed out every time there was a new book. But then bulk mailing was also, there were 100 problems with bulk mailing at that time. And then I remember whatever we could do in terms of blogging, or sort of getting in touch with people who had blogs. But it wasn't like book bloggers like now. It wasn't like bookstagrammers like now. It was a very different kind of an ecosystem. It was fairly hard to find them. You couldn't just go on Facebook or Twitter and kind of know who's working with books. So yeah, I mean, if I think back at to that time, it feels like a wasteland in terms of really getting in touch with people who would be interested in what we had to offer. Yeah.
And how did that and even now, how did that position independent publishing when you also position in front of or juxtaposed with the big five, the Penguins and the. So, how did social media and how does social media impact that? Kira, will go with you.
Sure. Well, I think as a small publishing house and an independent publisher, I think social media for us gave us the opportunity to really build community around the work that we're doing. So we weren't just a publisher with kind of a logo on the back of the book that no one really cared about, and it was all about the authors. We kind of became a space online ourselves where people could come to us to learn about the work we're doing, why we do it, the authors that we represent and serve, and the readers that we connect with. And so I think, for us, that's so important to be able to create a community and have people repeat buy from us, know us, follow us on our journey, be part of that journey across the years, where before that, with social media, we wouldn't have been able to create that. It would kind of be, if someone was lucky to stumble across one of our books online, or it would come through the author and their promotion of the book. But for us to be able to have a community that's long lasting and existing and has a life of its own on social media has been really, really important to us as an independent publisher.
Arpita?
Yeah, I think, building, that's such an important thing, Kira, the way when you're talking about building that narrative and becoming visible as a space online and not just a logo on the back of a book. And ours was exactly the same kind of experience. And I think we really leaned in to that. And we wanted to kind of build a particular kind of narrative where we sort of underlined, because our publishing is so political and, so sort of kind of, well, taking on, or rather speaking truth to power. The whole idea was underlining transparency and accountability for us. And so we divided things up. So for instance, the youngest person in the team usually handles Instagram. And I am on Twitter. So it's, the Twitter handle has really always been my handle. And it's my politics, which give Yoda Press face there. And Facebook is handled by someone else. And basically what we were trying to do, of course, we have intersecting sort of promotions, and we're constantly discussing the way we want to present ourselves But part of it was also, I was very clear from the beginning, whoever handles that handle will give something of themselves to that handle and will show themselves to that handle, because ultimately it's about the humans and it's not some faceless entity, which is very much coming back to your original questions. I mean, very much what a lot of the bigger publishers, you remember earlier there were the big six, then they became the big five, and yeah. So there, the dictum was, this kind of, and I worked in one, so, and I worked in another large academic publishing house. So I know how they handle social media. For the longest time was, it has to be very regulated. It has to stand for what the company stands for, the press stands for. There shouldn't be nothing which shows the human behind the handle, whoever that might be. Of course, they have now learned that that was the biggest mistake they could have made, because nobody really cared a damn. I mean, the whole idea behind social media was flying in the face of fake advertising on television and on print media, which young people had got sick and tired of. And so there is always the quest on social media for the real narrative. And so if you're going to try and feed them another narrative that sounds like a vanilla kind of text which they can read on any corporate flyer, they're not interested. And I find now I am seeing some of the large houses in India, the big five, I mean, some of them, not all of them still, beginning to do social media the way the smaller presses do it, which is much more, kind of intimate and much more sort of showing ourselves. And the other thing I want to say is that it also gave us a level playing field, which we had never had. With the big four or big five, or with the large family-run publishing houses in India, which had all the money in the world of real estate, off the back of real estate mostly. So all the paid advertising was their domain. But now, not only was it a level playing field, turned out that we were way more creative at showing ourselves or presenting ourselves than they were. So it was an interesting kind of reversal of fortunes. Well, not entirely reversal of fortunes. It's not like I became a millionaire or something, but it was a kind of interesting reversal in how it was playing out till that point. Yeah.
Kira, would you like to add something to that?
No, I think I agree that level playing field existed, and I think my background wasn't in publishing at the time that I entered it, and I don't think I perhaps would have been able to enter publishing and set up my own publishing house in the way that I did had it not been for social media and that level playing field that existed at the time. It kind of allowed for people who had an idea or had some sort of desire to put work out into the world that perhaps wasn't being picked up by big five kind of publishing houses. And it created a level playing field, but a lot of space and opportunity for publishers like us to be able to claim some space and publish work that was otherwise not being published.
True, true. So, how transformative has social media been for the publishing sector, especially because I feel that, and by extension, technology as well, because I'm always thinking that we have yet to, this part of the world, in my perception, we need a little more stepping up when it comes to innovation, technology, and by extension, social media. Am I right in saying that? What are your views? Arpita, I'll go first with you.
Social media is huge here now. I mean, at least if I speak about India, South Asia, I feel social media is absolutely, like, some people would say monstrous, out of control even. So I don't know. And as I said, I mean, I've taught in a public university, and now I teach in a private liberal arts university, and it's the same across the board. They are, fabulous with technology and social media. I felt that in the publishing industry, it was a little different because publishing in India and in South Asia, if I may say, so it's a slightly demographic is older. And the people who hold the power even today, I mean, they're not young people. And, it still remains to be seen. Once millennials really start holding those positions, those decision-making positions, uh, then I think we're going to see the real power of what it means to have this generation, the millennials and Gen Z, and what they bring to technology and social media within the industry. Um, as late as 2018, 19, I remember being in publishing seminars where not just much older people, but even my peer group was bemoaning the fact that now they had to deal with bookstagrammers and not book critics. And, I remember getting into arguments with people at that point, saying that, you know, just completely missing the picture here, because as we now know, and I was recently at a workshop at my university, and my very young audience, who are in their 20s, and we were discussing the fact that actually if you're not going for the paid bookstagrammers, that's a different story. But in a lot of ways, the genuine, brilliant sort of book bloggers and bookstagrammers, book talkers, who are known to be avidly reading and looking for books to promote or to discuss online, will give you much more genuine critique than many book critics, particularly old days. I mean, book criticism, book critiques, what we don't want to talk about is it was all based on social and cultural capital. And the fact is that, I mean, if you happen to have that kind of cultural capital and social capital as an author or as a so-called expert in a field, the book editor from a well-known magazine would reach out to you to do the review. And a lot of that was not genuine. It was not something as organic as a young person finding a book and being excited by it and talking about it. So I don't know. For me, I think with the next, as I said, with the millennials really coming into the decision-making positions, which is just about beginning to happen now, I think we're going to see much more of what they do with what they know intrinsically of technology and social media. Um, and the fact that the publishing industry the demographic has been much older in India, at least, or in Pakistan, or in Nepal, even in Sri Lanka, has meant that we haven't actually seen that kind of imaginative, innovative use of technology, perhaps, as you're talking about. That's my take on it. Yeah.
Kira?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we've kind of seen the full potential of social media. And I think as publishers, sometimes it can be really hard to know how to actually use some of these tools in a way that can be effective for the business. I know for us, when we saw the transformation the most was during the pandemic. We had no option but to find readers and connect with readers through online means. I think pre-COVID, perhaps we wouldn't have thought to come together in this capacity to have this conversation online. And I think that's when I really saw the industry shift, and those that had already invested in social media and built a community, built platforms, were really able to capitalize on it from then on. I think those that hadn't really struggled during that time, and it was a lot of scrambling to try and figure out, well, how do we do this thing? How do we transfer the work that we've been doing in a certain way for so long into an online platform and an online space, because that's the only way we could do it. So I think some of us kind of got thrown into the deep end and had to figure it out. Where for us, because we had already been quite a digitally built business, we were able to get through that time pretty smoothly and have very successful launches. And for me, that was a sign that, okay, investing in this is the right thing, and we are on the right track, and having success because of that. So it was that moment that really showed me that the whole industry was now shifting, because there was no other option.
Yeah.
True, true. Uh, do you think social media has a role to play when it comes to the success of a book? Is there any impact? And I ask this because several festivals that I've attended here in Dubai as well, and this has been a big question and a lament as well. So, what do you say to that, Arpita? We'll go with you.
I absolutely think so. Depends on how you campaign, of course, for a book. But for me, it's I have examples where when we had the lockdown during the pandemic, we put out the only even now only graphic book on Shaheen Bagh, on the Muslim women sitting to protest against the draconian anti-CA law, which happened in 2019, 2020. And we took a year to put together that graphic book entirely during the lockdown. And then we were absolutely determined to release the book in 2021 as the anniversary of Shaheen Bagh approached. And there was no money coming in. There were no revenues because we were in the midst of a lockdown and sales had dropped to zero. We were making a little bit of money doing online workshops, which is what I was paying salaries with. So what we did was essentially on social media, we put out a pre-order call. And we had within about a month or a little more, we had received enough pre-orders to be able to print a few thousand copies of this book, which at that point, of course, there was a real sort of political wave to support this book, of course, but people were also scared to buy this book because, I mean, the government was really sort of cracking down on people who were part of those protests, but it was still such a huge success. And I was asked to be in conversation with this young author called Alina Gufran, who's published a novel, No Place to Call Home, I think it's called. And I've just been watching how beautifully Westland has been running the social media campaign for her. And I was in conversation with her at one of the Delhi launch of the book. And then a friend of mine was in conversation with her in the Bangalore launch of the book. And we were all talking about how they were jam-packed, events. And books really flew off the shelves at the launches, which is rare these days. Book launches are not having the same kind of sales or impact as we used to see earlier. So it was wonderful to see it. And I know it was completely on the back of social media with very, very active collaboration by the author herself, of course, which was the same in our case with Shaheen Bagh. So perhaps that is the important ingredient, in a sense. The publishers have to do social media campaigns, books with authors. It has to be a collaborative attempt. Otherwise, it might not get the results that you expect, that you really want. I don't know if Kira will agree with me, but that's what I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think social media plays a huge role in the success of a book, but like you said, it does depend on the publisher working with the author and the type of content that the author is able to create, because I think it's not as easy as kind of posting a picture of the book or the cover. It really is, with our non-fiction authors, it's about, telling the story behind the story, building their credibility, establishing trust, being really authentic. For our fiction authors, it's more about creating an online universe that people kind of want to be in and be part of. And so it's it's not easy to do that as an author, and a lot of authors struggle with it because they're writers and not social media marketers. So it does become quite challenging. But I think there's also challenges to social media, and it can have the opposite effect. So it can be super successful and a runaway success. But now that everybody is online, we've seen cases, not with our publishing house or our authors, but there have been cases where an author, expresses a view or says something online, and the sales of their books, just tank and they get boycotted online. And so there is this real risk that comes with playing the social media game. It can be a runaway success if the response online is really good. It can also be a big flop if something goes wrong, or the wrong thing is said or posted, or a bad review goes out and then goes viral. Those sorts of things, can be a real worry and concern for a publisher who doesn't have that much control over how the social media world plays out once the book is launched.
Yeah, and two things. It this goes back to what Arpita had said about through social media, the way you wanted to present Yoda was through that human interaction. And this, I think, says the same when it comes to the author and publisher engagement, and how that universe, like Kira mentioned, how that universe is created by the author on social media. That humanness and that personal touch is needed. And also, when you're talking about the risks of playing, when it comes to social media, the risk is cancel culture as well.
Yeah, I mean, but that's life, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Playing out virtually. I don't really call it cancel culture, Sabine. I must say, for me, I think it's a culture of accountability. I do feel that those are the two ways of looking at it. Culture of
True,
great
true, true.
accountability, or on the other hand, some will view it as cancel culture. And of course, for me, it's not as if I haven't seen this play out for my own authors, or I've remained unaffected by it. But I think, to tell you the truth, I mean, it's when you have created such a potent media, which is so wedded to the idea of intimacy across such huge borders and real-time kind of reactions and impact. But of course, there's going to be this, kind of sense of judgment attached to it, which will also be felt in real time and as quickly as the benefits. So for me, I mean, it's just about, it's not going to be, I can't, I perhaps have lived too long at 50. I feel nothing's ever going to be just a bed of roses. And if anything, that's going to give you such massive benefits to get the word out there, will of course have something worked into it, which at times also, to tell you the truth, is something that I'm very thankful for today. I mean, uh, you know, uh, I'm very glad I have worshipped, my daughter and I have worshipped Neil Gaiman's writings. And I'm very, very glad I know, that I'm a little more educated today about what some of the most disturbing bits of his writing sort of
True.
sprang from,
Yeah.
and that it sprang from a truly predatory way of conducting himself. And we would not have been there, had it not been for the podcast. I mean, the article happened later.
True,
But
true.
so I don't know. I feel like something will have to give. It can't all be a bed of roses.
I think
Yeah.
I think I absolutely agree with you, because maybe we have to think in terms of binaries, you know. It either it's cancel culture or a culture of accountability. I think we need to have a bigger picture and not see things in binaries. Uh,
Yeah,
that's
that makes sense to me. I think that's one way of also dealing with a situation if you have been cancelled. I think it's important for those who, I'm not talking about dastardly criminal people, I'm talking about, a lot of others who are called out for something, which as a result of which their work takes a hit for some time and their visibility takes a hit. But 5 years later, I see those same people using the same channels to talk about their work again. So perhaps we should really understand it is actually just a medium. What is still at the center of the conversation is what you do with realizing you've made a mistake or realizing that you've acted in an egregious manner, and build yet another narrative, but this time perhaps make it genuine. I don't know, Kira.
No, I would agree. And I like what you said about the culture of accountability, because I think you can tell if a publisher or an author online is not going all in. And I think the days of kind of having this very curated,
Yeah.
this is the image, this is the narrative we want to present, and we have control over that. The days of that are gone. As a publisher and as a writer, the internet will hold you accountable to whatever it is that you're putting out there and the way that you put it out there. And we've all heard stories of, incredible writers who've written best-selling
Yeah.
books, but behind the scenes, they're a nightmare to work with and not nice people.
Yeah.
And so that mode of operating is completely gone. And if a publisher or an author is afraid to go all in on social media and is still attached to kind of having this very controlled image, then the audience is going to feel that. It's not going to feel genuine and authentic, and they're going to lose the connection. And that's ultimately going to have a bad impact on sales at the end of the day as well.
And how has social media impacted how we consume literature?
Well, I think the algorithm plays a role, and I think sometimes I wonder, and I don't know exactly the statistics on that, but it does feel like, depending on how you use one of these platforms, you are going to receive information, therefore stories and promotions of things that kind of match that. So it does concern me that maybe we're kind of living in a bubble and only kind of hearing and seeing and reading stories that are actually, things that we already know and think about the world. So we're not really expanding our worldview, not necessarily coming across books or authors that would not be, ones that would naturally be within our space. And so I think the algorithm and the way that that controls and dictates what it is that we see is a concern for me, particularly because we represent a lot of diverse authors, unique stories that, we don't want them to just be speaking to their own people with the similar lived experience. We want to be able to have that wisdom and story reach people that would have no idea around what that person's lived experience would be like. And so I think that's one of the concerns I have about the ways in which it shapes the kind of content and stories that we get to know about and read about.
Arpita?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Of course, I was just, as Kira was speaking, I was thinking of this novel, this best-selling novel in China called The Three-Body Problem, which was first made into a show on Chinese television, and now, of course, it's been made into a absolutely, sort of very, very bingeable show directed by the two people who were behind Game of Thrones, and season one was on I think on Netflix or maybe Prime Video here last year, and now season two is coming. And one of the things that it talks about is, and I might be giving away a spoiler, sorry about that, but one of the things it talks about is you never voice what you're thinking. What you're thinking, keep it within your mind. Because if you're going to voice what you're thinking, the AI is always listening. And it's really interesting because these days, it's amazing. It's like I keep telling my husband, my phone is listening all the time, because if he and I are having a conversation and I say something about the Pope, or of course, today is a bad day to give that example because Pope sadly has passed on today, but it suddenly starts throwing, in normal circumstances, suddenly starts throwing news stories at me about the Pope. Or if I say something about organic cotton, and suddenly I start getting all these ads for, platforms that are selling organic cotton kurtas on Instagram or whatever. And it's so, like Kira is saying, I think the way to perhaps defeat the algorithm from a reader's point of view is to fly in the face of the algorithm and kind of confound the algorithm by remaining searchers who are not just driven by what is being proposed to them, but what they themselves might be sort of thinking of or coming to. I don't know where you draw the line anymore. I realize that. But that idea of bookshop browsing, which we used to do earlier, and which we still do. Some of us are still in our brick and mortar neighborhood bookstores, waiting to be surprised by something that the shelf presents to us, or the bookseller suggests to us. That sort of browsing, somehow to keep that alive. If you ask me how do you do that from a publishing point of view, I, like Kira, am absolutely confounded and have no answers, because the algorithm seems to defeat you every time. When you're trying to do it from the market point of view, from the producer point of view. And I simply do not have the resources which can beat the algorithm and take my book to the top of a list, a search engine list. And as I said, neither does that way of searching excite me. So yeah, I think that remains a bit of a black hole in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And how important then it is to engage your audience on social media?
Incredibly important, impossibly important. I mean, we do whatever we can. I think of it all the time. My little team, we discuss it all the time. How to engage different segments how to keep engaging different segments of the audience. And I say impossibly important because it just feels at times that no matter what we do, it's not enough. But yeah, one has to just keep trying. And the way we think of it is now just trying different registers. It can't just be, so it's different social media platforms, but it's also within that, what are you doing? You're doing what the platform demands, but you're also doing podcasts, you're also doing workshops, you're also sort of, kind of doing more interactive sessions. You're also doing reels. It's just trying to kind of build the whole gamut of, uh, you know, of sort of creations that can be there on these various platforms. And sometimes, and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, when some authors ask me, really, do we have to do so much? I mean, do we have to do so many different types? One of the ways in which I explain it to my authors, because I teach writing as well, is that, look, remember the Aristotelian parameters for writing. We have to hit the logos, which is credibility, ethos, which is credibility, logos, which is logic, argument, reasoning, and pathos, which is the human connect. It's the same three things that we are constantly trying to sort of bring into play also when we are marketing your book or talking about your writing on social media, and whatever falls within that. Yeah.
Kira?
Yeah, I think in the last couple of years, we've started to feel like there's a bit of a shift happening online, particularly in our community, where it's shifting from just giving content like information, tips, sharing the books, what we're doing. And it's like our community is expecting more from us. So getting that engagement is becoming harder and harder. The ways in which we entertain our audience are having to turn the dial up. The ways in which we share information, we're having to turning the dial up. And there's some different things that we're trying. I think our community in particular are really eager to have moments of in real life connection time as well. And looking at ways where we can take the connection that we have with our community online and make it more tangible, whether it's sending out book covers or sending out copies of the book or having real life moments where we come together and connect, little things that kind of go above and beyond just providing content online seems to be working for us right now, because we hit a little bit of a stale spot about a year or so ago, where we were like, okay, we're churning out content, but it's not having the same level of engagement. And what has worked for us is kind of finding ways that take that online connection and bring it into a real life experience for our community and our readers. But that's been really challenging, but also important for us in this, competition for people's attention and maintaining a really engaged and loyal community online.
Well, I'll come to the last question, which is, are there any pitfalls when it comes to social media? And Kira, you can go first.
I think there's many. I think as a publisher, one of the pitfalls we fell into, and we still fall into it all the time, is feeling like we have to be everywhere all the time. And every few months, there seems to be a new platform and a new place and a new technology that you have to jump on, or you're going to miss this big opportunity. And so I think it's really hard as a publisher and as a team to just keep our focus in an online space that's just pulling you in so many directions. And I think that's probably the biggest pitfall we fall into until today, and have to pull ourselves back out of and keep ourselves focused on track. And also just making sure that we're not too dependent on social media, because those platforms and algorithms do change all the time. So we do need to have other tools and things that we can lean on, so we don't have all our eggs in one basket when it comes to connecting with our community of readers.
Arpita?
Yeah, I mean, that's, of course, very, very important, to kind of maintain perspective. As I said, at the end of the day, knowing that this is a medium, it's a channel, the real story is yours. And treating it like that, not letting that take over your life, The other thing is, I find, also about you're giving people access. I mean, the way we do it, we give people access. So, of course, the most annoying part of it is when I get people writing, we'll keep getting people writing to us about when they're looking for jobs or internships on social media. And while it's still okay on LinkedIn to do that, it's not okay. And I don't know why, and there are times when you put this out, look, if you want to apply for an internship, there's a way to do it, please do it that way. But, there's this sense that if you're on social media so much, if you're that accessible, if you're not anonymous, like many of the big publishing houses are, then we can just reach out to you this way. And that then, you have to make it very clear what your boundaries are. Or authors will just mouth off, at times, like Kira was referring to it earlier. I remember this one book where we had 100 or so contributors, that Sabin the Yari, which is the anthology of friendship by women and queer people. And we had a little, because we had 100 contributors, and we were able to pay a small honorarium to everyone. God alone knows how we managed it, but we did. And apart from printing and publishing and all of that. And I remember this one contributor who suddenly put a thing out on Twitter, maybe, saying that, oh, these Savarna feminists, not knowing about my mixed caste background, or anyway, the Savarna feminists should walk the talk before they do books like Yari, because I haven't got my honorarium. And it's just because we are so particular about our record keeping with everything on social media, everything that happens virtually, because everything at Yoda Press, is kind of virtual, that within minutes, we knew that she had been paid through a Google Pay payment and were able to. So I shared it on Twitter saying that perhaps check back. And here's the proof that you were paid on such and such day. And the fact is that, this really damages me. The fact that people know that you have been paid, at the most, people will say, oh God, she should have been more careful. But when you're writing about an feminist independent press and saying they didn't pay me, that does much more damage to us. There are people who will not come to us to publish their book or buy our books because they just saw your tweet. And, so please be a little more careful, because you're not dealing with some mammoth, some whatever. You're dealing with, the reason you have access to us is because we are this accessible, because we are this small, tiny but mighty, whatever. And so, knowing one's boundaries and being. And I learned this actually from Naresh Fernandez, who's the editor of Scroll, which is a brilliant news platform in India. And I used to see how, very often people will have things to say about Scroll, sort of reportage or something. And the editor himself, because he's so much on social media, would write back something. So it was, and I learned that if you're going to be on social media, you can't just go quiet. If people are calling you out for something, you have to show yourself, even if it is to say, you remember, Sabine, when the Kashmir book drama happened, I at that moment, I had no idea what was going on. So all I did was write on Twitter saying, I'm really sorry about what's happened, because it sounds egregious beyond belief, but we're trying to find out what went wrong with the author. You just have to then walk the talk all the time. You can't just disappear.
Yeah, I think owning it is really important. And that
owning it also in moments of discomfort.
Yes,
owning
absolutely,
it can't
absolutely.
be just when it's giving you power.
Exactly. That's when your authenticity shows, and that's when the integrity shows as well.
Yeah. Because if you apologize and mean it, a lot of people might still come after you, but you've said something. You have not tried to shove it under the rug. You can say that. You can say, but look, I am trying to explain this. I am trying to speak to you. Of course, you can't keep doing it again and again. As I said, you need to know your boundaries. But I think it's important to realize that as much intimacy and accessibility that it gives to us, it can't just be something we leverage in moments of power. It
Absolutely.
has to be taken on board in moments of discomfort as well.
Because that
Absolutely.
builds trust as well. The biggest issue that media is facing is trust, because we're living in a polarized world as it is, and building that trust comes from challenges as well, how you're reacting and dealing with it.
Yeah,
Kira? Yeah.
absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there is that more intimate relationship that we have with our readers now and that authors have with their readers. And, like any relationship, if you want to maintain it, you have to be able to work your way through that. And it's not going to be perfect all the time. And I think it goes back to what I was saying before, that people who are online feel if someone is 100% in it. And in that
Yeah.
relationship with them, if they're giving you their attention, their time, they're following you, they're engaging with your content, then at the minimum, you have to be able to show up for them in the good moments and the bad moments as well, and be in that space and able to own it, no matter what's happening. And I think a lot of publishers who do that gain a lot of respect from that. And I think it also works to strengthen the relationship the publisher has with their authors as well, when they're able to kind of stand their ground and stand in the face of those kind of things that come at you, and defend the work that they're doing and what they're putting out into the world.
True, true. So, any last words? Kira, we'll go first with you.
I think it's going to be interesting to just see the social media of the future and how that changes the way that we do things. I think for us, we're a very community-driven publishing house, so it's a really exciting time to be able to engage with people, not just in our immediate physical community, but have a community that transcends borders and countries and nations. And so it's a really exciting time for publishers to be able to reach readers in places we perhaps wouldn't have been able to otherwise. So I know we've spoken a lot about some of the pitfalls and the challenges that come with social media. And that's part of it, but it's a small part of it. I think most of the time, social media is an exciting place that fosters real, genuine connection with people who enjoy the same things that we do. And it's a great space to be able to build diverse communities and have people share thoughts and dialogue in ways that they haven't been able to before social media.
Arpita?
Yeah, I resonate with everything Kira's saying. My only fear is I don't know what AI is going to do. Of course, that remains to play out as well. Now you see Grok on Twitter, and Meta is there. I mean, every time you sort of do any search, I have to skip over the sort of the Meta AI response to try and find more credible sources. Of course, I'm not talking about social media, I'm talking about Google. But so I don't know. I mean, it'll play itself out now, and we'll see what AI will bring to social media. But in other ways, I mean, for me as an independent publisher, I think it's been a tremendous way to build community and not to feel alone doing something fairly difficult. I mean, it's how I met you, Sabin. So, yeah, I have a lot to thank social media for. Yeah.
Absolutely. And with AI being more, into technology, one thing I think is important is to democratize it. When there's ChatGPT, but when DeepSeek came, there was like,
Yeah.
and that is how we democratize that, and that is how we the algorithmic biases that there are, the way we're feeding, data, who is feeding, how it's being fed, big tech. So uh, until we democratize that landscape, the technology landscape, the AI landscape, things will remain a little, more than a little challenging. That's what I think. So democratization is really important.
A lot of young people in my classrooms and outside, I hear them talking about digital commons, and that gives me a lot of hope, you know. But then, of course, I mean, the kind of forces that are afoot right now, there's so much resource behind that, behind forces that are flying in the face of anything like a digital commons, you know. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play out.
Yeah,
But yeah, all
yeah.
people can do, all independents and those who believe in digital commons can do is continue to
Yes,
push back.
definitely. Digital commons, digital governments, digital collectives. I think,
Yeah.
let's hope for that, and inspire that as well. All of us, doing this together. Thank you so much, Arpita, Kira, for this amazing session. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And folks, stay tuned for more.